Somewhere, a computer science student straight out of university.
I'm going to change the world with code.
5 years later.
I hate this, I hate this, I hate this, I hate this.
Software development is a pretty sweet career. You get to work indoors, none of that physical labor stuff. You get to create stuff, you get to solve problems, and it's financially rewarding. Some would even say that developers are basically modern day wizards. We get to create things out of thin air by using complicated tools. But when asked, do you like your job? Things don't always seem so bright and shiny, depending on who's asking and who they ask. The answer to that question might actually surprise you. I did some research to find out why do developers hate their jobs, and there's a few points that constantly came up. Those points in short is time pressure, the constant need to stay up to date, technical debt, constant context switching, the jack of all trades syndrome, and lastly, the stress. Let's look at each one of these in a little bit more detail. Time pressure. In software development, it can often feel that everything is always urgent. Finish that one project with the extremely tight deadline? Great! Here's 2 more! By the way, you also need to support the project that you just finished and do all of that while there are normal support requests that comes in. And all support requests that comes in will always be extremely urgent. It's easy to see why a developer would say that everything is urgent all the time. And for smaller software development departments that doesn't have a dedicated support engineer or test engineer, that time pressure can get even more insane. Developers are stuck doing new projects, fixing bugs, and a bunch of other things, including being a mechanic, and all of this before the 11 a.m. stand-up. The constant need to stay up to date. Technology is constantly changing, and even the very coding languages we use have updates. Now I have to go and read up on all of those fun new libraries, haha, and how to use them. These are the expectations, but the reality is that often a software developer will Google them on the spot when they need them. Technical debt. Because of time pressures, often shortcuts are taken, and more often than not, those shortcuts do come back to haunt you. And to make it even more fun, those little shortcuts aren't necessarily well documented. There are no breadcrumbs. The really fun part is when somebody lazily hacked the system and you now have to figure it out when they already left the company. Now people are banging on your door and panic ensues because there's an issue on production and only you can resolve it. Constant context switching. As if the previous mentioned points weren't enough, you also are expected to do your day job while focusing on multiple things. On any one time, you'll have an IDE open on one side, server metrics open on another side, your emails and the Jira board open, all on multiple different screens, meaning they're all in your peripheral vision. Go look up any job spec for software developers and you'll see that a requirement is for them to know, and I'm going to read this off because I need to get this line right. They need to know Java, Python, MySQL, JAX, Flags, Hacks, Stacks, and dabble in the dark arts of PHP for some reason. Most of those are made up.
The stress.
With all of the things we've already mentioned, many software developers are also perfectionists, meaning they want their product to be absolutely perfect when they push their code to the repo. With all of the things above, it's easy to see where all the pressure is coming from and how that stress can be quite crazy to deal with. All of that sounds pretty crazy, but it's still pretty sweet to be a software developer. And digging this hole even deeper for myself, I'm going to attempt to address each one of the problems that we identified in short. Please note that these are only my opinions and there are many ways to tackle each one of these problems, but maybe this can give you a little bit of guidance. Time pressure. So time management is one of those skills that everybody needs to learn, and everybody will engage with it differently. But I believe that there are multiple resources available on the internet for free and even on YouTube that you can just go search. Obviously, a common trope is to say that you need to organize your tasks and do the difficult ones when you have the most energy and leave the easier ones for later on, blah, blah, blah. You can find the way that works best for you. But what about those tight deadlines, the things that are seemingly out of our control? And here something very important comes up. Communication. When a tight deadline comes up and you believe that you will not be able to meet it, it's very important to early on already communicate and say, listen, I do not think we will be able to meet this deadline. And it's also very important to not just communicate that you won't be able to meet that deadline, but to also provide data as to why you believe you won't be able to meet that deadline. Because data turns statements from opinion into facts. The constant need to stay up to date. Right, so here we are going to have to do a mindset shift. And that mindset shift is going from now I need to learn another thing and it's just going to take so much time, into how can I have an attitude on lifelong learning. I did an entire video on the importance of lifelong learning that should be somewhere available on screen now, if you want to find out a little bit more about that. Technical debt. I'm sorry that you have to deal with this, but unfortunately it's part and parcel of being a developer. And there are many things that we can do to resolve this problem. We can try and get rid of technical debt before it even occurs, but what about the pressures that exist because of it? Here, we need to communicate clearly again. Remember that doing X task will take longer because of Y. And we need to clearly communicate this to our managers, our seniors, and all stakeholders that need to know. And again, we need to communicate clearly with data to support our claims. This is a tough one because in actuality, you don't know what you don't know. But what you can do is you can speak up as soon as possible. Constant context switching. Compartmentalize. Here we need to remove the problem by shifting from a everything all at once mentality or mindset into a one thing at one time mindset. I know that multitasking has been glorified and even championed by many, but it's becoming more clear that multitasking isn't necessarily as good as many say it is. Minimize the windows that aren't necessarily immediately important to the task that you are working on. And if you have the opportunity available for you, then think about even booking out an hour of absolute focus time to focus on the most complicated tasks that you have to do. Jack of all trades syndrome. Here I'm going to be honest and say that I don't necessarily have an answer for this question. I think that it is an industry-wide issue, and changing the industry might be a little bit more complicated and might take a lot of time. But maybe we can start a conversation on it. Perhaps tell me in the comments if you have any good ideas to deal with the jack of all trades syndrome. The stress. As for the stress, there's many ways that you can deal with it. Breathe. Try to relax, do the whole meditation thing if that works for you, go for a walk. There are tons of ways to try and deal with stress. And identify if maybe it's time for you to take a vacation. I would like to emphasize that software development is a great career, but it's not free from its frustrations. And we can address these frustrations. Or maybe you just need a vacation. I do videos on topics that I think are relevant for people working in software and tech. So if that describes you, maybe think about hitting the subscribe button. And a like is always welcome. I hope this helps. Cheers!